Wow, rarely have I had a month of contrasts like this January was. Welcome to Madame Books, where I talk about fantasy mostly, science fiction sometimes, and comics occasionally. I'm a little late, but I wanted to share January with you. January was interesting. I read possibly the worst book that I've read in a very long time. I don't do reviews of books I really don't like, but in my monthly wrap-ups I will talk about them, otherwise it would be an incomplete summary of the month. So I might rant a little. I'll try not to. I'll try to be polite. But bad book. And I read possibly the best book of the year. In fact, two of what could be the best book of the year. I also watched one of the worst things I've seen on television in a very long time, and watched a couple of really, really awesome things. So let's get right into it, shall we? I mentioned it in December when I started reading it, and I finished it in January. It was a reread, but it was still an awesome book and an awesome ending to a trilogy. That's right. Robin Hobb yet again. Fool's Fate is the third book in the 20-man trilogy, which is part of the 16-book series, Realm of the Elderlings. I really need to do a You Should Read Realm of the Elderlings video, because it's so good, y'all, as the Americans say. This is the third book in a trilogy that gets back to Fitz and the Fool. And it was so emotional. It was so good to be back with these characters. It was so good to actually see them, maybe without spoiling anything, come to a somewhat happy ending. I assume it won't last. I have finished this trilogy, so I'll be moving on to the next tetralogy, the Rainwild Chronicles. And I really look forward to that. I've read that one before, but I haven't read the last trilogy, which is also about Fitz and the Fool. So I'm super curious to get to that. I'm almost tempted to skip Rainwild, but I will not, of course, because Derry would whip me if I did. When I finished Fool's Fate, I was, because I've been mood reading, and I've got a TBR, which is essentially just a really big shelf full of books that I haven't read, or that I want to read, or I want to read again, but I'm not planning anything, or at least I'm planning as little as possible. Because of that, I got to the end of Fool's Fate, and what often happens to me when I finish a really, really good, very, very engaging, and maybe very emotional book, is I sort of sit there going, oh, wow, what could follow that up? And I usually consciously give the book a little space and not read anything for a day or two, or maybe only read really light short stories. But on the day that I finished Fool's Fate, I got a book in the post. And it was a book I'd forgotten about. I had actually asked for an arc of this. It's strangely not called Time to Kill. I don't know why they did this. This is not the title. This is the cover of only the arc, apparently. On the spine, it has the actual cover, which is In the Shadow of Their Dying. It's by Michael R. Fletcher and Anna Smith Spark. They wrote it together. The basic premise is there's a city under siege. Nobody in the city can get out. You've got a number of different characters who are all different kinds of despicable or selfish or whatever. And you've got a demon on the loose in the city. I thought, nice pressure cooker sort of model, and it started off well. I think, I'm not 100% sure of this, but I heard that Anna Smith Spark wrote the bits with the demon, which have a very, very different kind of prose, because you're getting the internal thoughts and experiences of this demon, and of course it's not human. And that was pretty consistently throughout the whole thing very well done. The rest of it, I think, was written by Michael R. Fletcher, and it felt like a grimdark satire of grim darkness. There's only so many times that you can say piss and blood and mud and dog meat and weak ale before it starts sounding like you're making a joke about grimdark stereotypes. And it was over and over and over again hammering just how horrible the world is home, but in exactly the same ways, over and over and over again, repetitively. That got really boring and kind of annoying. And then towards the end, without any kind of explanation, characters start saying things like, the way we use it in modern English, or dude. One of the characters actually says dude. It's like, something like that. I guess if this had been established throughout the story and that there was a character that spoke that way, it would have been weird, but kind of not such a big deal. But all of a sudden, in the last 50 pages, or 40 or 30 or something, characters start talking like that. As well as that, there were a number of things that were built up to be really big deals, and a couple of things that were built up to be impossible or extremely difficult. And it turns out in the last 50 pages that, actually those big deals weren't very big deals after all. Those impossible things weren't actually impossible after all. And the difficult things weren't even really that difficult. I DNF'd this about 20 or 30 pages from the end, almost physically threw it across the room. This book made me angry. It seemed to think that I was stupid. And it felt like it was Michael R. Fletcher. Like I said, the demon bits that I think were the primary thing that Anna Smith Spark wrote, they were actually pretty well done. The rest of it just felt like a bit of a joke. And the joke was on me. Didn't like it. Don't want to read anything by Michael R. Fletcher ever again at this point. Although I know a lot of people have really enjoyed some other things he's written. But this, I wasn't into it, if you couldn't tell. Sandwiching that between two extremely good books turned out to be a good idea. I reread The Spear Cuts Through Water. This cannot be my book of the year because it was my book of the year last year. However, it's that good. And rereading it, I realized that there's a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't really notice or realize was happening in my first read. I really enjoyed rereading this. I flew through it. Dan and some other people were hosting a read-along, and on their Discord, The Unexpected Party, Dan had organized it so that basically each chapter, the chapters are really big in this, and they are days. So there's before everything starts, there's a section called before, a section called after, and in between there are 5 days. And they're pretty big. And Dan had organized it on the Discord that each day had a channel. And I think it was also planned that each day would be a week, like everybody read it and then wait a week and read the next one and so on. I could not do that. I just didn't put it down. I've got a complete review of this. If you would like to see that, you can find it. So I won't say too much about the story or the amazing structure of it. What you should go look at is Evie's interview with the author, Simon Jimenez. She did an amazing interview, and it's pretty hard to get him for interviews, but she managed it. And it was such a nice thing to listen to. It was so good to get a little insight into how he works, how he thinks, where his ideas came from, that kind of thing. So if you're interested, go check that out on Evie's channel. I'll put a link down in the description. Again, not as big as it looks. I read the second book of Amber, which is actually only about 120 pages. It's like 1/10 of this book. This is all 10 books of Amber. The Guns of Avalon by Roger Zelazny is the second Amber book. Corwin has got his complete memory back. He is advancing his attack on Amber and doing some really tricky things and picking up a number of secondary characters who become important, and we learn a little more about the family and so on and so forth. Good old school fantasy. I really enjoyed it. I will be continuing. I will be sticking the third Amber book in between some other chunky books some point in the near future. After Amber, even though it's not really a chunky book, I didn't feel like going back to a chunky book. So I went to one of the short stories that I mentioned in my recent short story video. I read Her Father's Sword by Robin Hobb. It's in the Book of Swords, the first Book of Swords. It's a Six Duchies story. It's a Realm of the Elderling story, but it's very side story. Fitz makes a sort of cameo appearance in it, but the main character in it is a girl who lives in a fishing village right around the time that all of the forging is happening. It's not really a spoiler. If you don't know what forging is, you don't know what forging is. If you do, you know what I mean. It's darker than I expected. It's a really dark little story, but it's interesting to get the perspective that we didn't really get because we're always getting Fitz's perspective in the Fitz trilogies. It was nice to get a peasant, bystander, not superhero Fitz, kind of outside the royal family perspective. And like I said, it was darker than I expected. I'm looking forward to getting through this short story collection because there are some real heavy hitters on there. If you didn't see it, go and check out my short story collection video that I did recently. And let's move on. Another short story. I'd read it before, but I wanted to read it again. I read Goats of Glory by Steven Erikson. It's a Malazan story. Again, it's sort of like the Robin Hobb story. It's set in the Malazan world. It has some of the things we're used to from Malazan, but it doesn't have any of the characters from Malazan. It's totally a side story happening somewhere in the world. It's not even really clear where, but it has a very Malazan feel, and it was funny as hell. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. And last but not least, for fiction novels, I had gotten a lot of recommendations when I mentioned Adrian Tchaikovsky on the Sunday Pub. Sunday Pub, if you don't know, is a thing I do every Sunday. It's a live stream. Anyone can join me on screen. Anyone can join and watch and write in the comments. Lots of people do. It's become a real regular thing, sort of a weekly tradition, which is awesome. I love it. And I've gotten a lot of recommendations. Too many recommendations. And when I mentioned Adrian Tchaikovsky, a lot of people said a good place to start is Elder Race, which is a novella, like you can see. It's pretty slim, 200, yeah, exactly 200 pages. It's really good. I really enjoyed it. It's an interesting idea. There are two POVs in it, and one of them is, I don't want to give the whole thing away, because there is kind of a surprise in it. But it has to do with two characters with extremely different perspectives on reality getting together to fulfill a quest together. And it's short and easy. The writing is very tight. It reads almost like a short story. I mean, it's a lot longer than most short stories, but it reads very snappy and direct. And I really enjoyed it. It took about a day or day and a half to read this. I just raced through it. And the verdict on Adrian Tchaikovsky, this was a really good taste test. And after reading this, I will definitely be reading more Tchaikovsky, which is good. It's really nice to find a really prolific author, a really fast author. There was a best of list from Locus magazine, best of 2023, and Tchaikovsky was in the science fiction list and in the fantasy list because he published both books last year. So he writes a lot. He's already written a fair bit. He finishes his series without any apparent problems, and he bangs out a book or two every year. So good guy to get into. I'm looking forward to more. And right at the end of the month, Angela from Do Unicorns Read, her YouTube channel, check it out, I'll link it down in the description. She's doing a read-along of June. I always joke that the Australian pronunciation is D-J-O-O-N, June. So June is, do I need to say anything about June? June is a classic. It's sci-fantasy. I would say it's actually fantasy sci. It's more fantasy than it is science fiction because it's not at all about technology. It's much more about weird stuff that people can do, i.e. basically magic. But it's also about ecology. It's especially about religion and the dangers of following a religion and of following a charismatic leader. It's the beginning of a very long series. I keep saying that June is basically 4 books and that the rest can kind of be ignored. I actually want to reread all of them, and I want to read 5 and 6. Chapter House and Heretics of Dune, just to say that I have, just so that my opinion, well, if they are as bad as I've been thinking for decades, that I am actually justified in having that opinion, and I don't just have that opinion not knowing and only based on secondhand information. Angela is hosting a read-along, and she invited me to read with and also to discuss. And our first discussion is this Saturday, the 10th of February. Check out her channel. I will link it down below. I'm really, really enjoying this. It's already the 8th of February as I record this. I'm already pretty far into this, but such a good book. I'm reading it for the 8th or 9th time. The main reason for me to want to read this is to get it out of the way, so to speak, to get it fresh in my mind again before the second movie comes out. Denis Villeneuve, his movie releases in Berlin anyway on the 28th of February. I already have tickets. I'm super excited. I loved the first one. One of the things I'm realizing though, as I'm reading this, it's become really clear to me how much was changed from the book to make that movie. I understand that. I am not a book adaptation purist. I know that you have to change a lot of things for the movies, and that movie actually turned out to be, I thought, excellent, but very different from the book. There are lots and lots of things that were removed. There were scenes that were added. There were scenes that were completely invented out of whole cloth. Very, very different. I'm really interested to see what they do with part 2 of the movie. And I love this book. This book is so good. I did actually finish the first Attack on Titan omnibus. It is 3 volumes, so I feel like I've given it a fair chance. Even though I bought the second omnibus already, I don't think I'll be continuing it. It is literally 80% of this is teenagers either screaming about saving humanity and failing to do so, or crying and being cowards, too cowardly to save humanity. And that's kind of it. The most interesting things in the whole thing, which is essentially the basic setup, the premise of the whole story, is set up in the first 5 or 10 pages. And as you can see, there are quite a few pages. Yeah, I wasn't crazy about this. I like the art style, which a lot of people don't, but that wasn't enough to motivate me to read it further. So I don't think I will be. Much better though, I decided to reread Hellboy. In fact, all of the Hellboy library editions that I own. I read 3 of them in January. These are just beautiful. I love the story. I love how connected to mythology and fairy tales and folklore it is. The artwork is just stunningly gorgeous, extremely minimal. Mike Mignola just has a beautiful hand for line and for huge areas of black that are expressive anyway. And the character of Hellboy, it's kind of hilarious. He's surrounded by intellectuals. And there's all of these interesting, bizarre things going on, and there are complicated, maybe, explanations for how it got to be. And Hellboy is basically there to punch monsters. He's a very down-to-earth character. These editions actually print the pages larger than they were in the original comic book issues, because these are nice, big, chunky, and they're lovely hardbound, cloth-bound editions. I will read another 3 at least this month, and eventually get the whole 9, I think it is, of these books finished. If you couldn't tell from all of that, the book of the month for January for me was Fool's Fate. Such a good book by itself, such a heartwarming, emotional, difficult, wonderful ending to a trilogy, and such a pleasure to read it again. Not that much happened with the channel itself in January, but channel adjacent news. The Fireside Discord launched in January. If you don't know about the Fireside, it's a Discord server that I'm running with Joanna and Josh. I'll link to their channels down below. They are both awesome people. We have similar but different enough to be interesting tastes in books. There are a lot of places where we overlap. There are a lot of places where they read stuff that I don't at all and would like to. And we started a new Discord, and it's been going well. It hasn't taken off that it's insane amounts of people on it, but that's actually a good thing as far as I'm concerned. It's staying cozy. It's got pretty regular conversation on it. It's still easy to find things and to find your way around on it, which is the problem I have with a lot of Discords, is they've got a million channels, huge long list. I don't know where anything is, and I just sort of give up pretty quickly. The Fireside, we want it to be a cozy place for friends to chat about books. Nothing more than that, and it's doing that already, which is awesome. And
The special editions.
what?
Malazan.
Yeah. It's not really to do with the channel exactly, but the Broken Binding announced in January a lot more details about their Malazan Book of the Fallen special editions that they'll be releasing this year in the summer. Exact dates are not public yet. It's going to be 3 books. The first 3 books as a set. You can't buy them individually. They will cost around £150, not each, for the whole set, so around £50 each. And the first one, Gardens of the Moon, is going to have this gorgeous cover by Felix Ortiz. Other than that, they also licensed art by my favorite Malazan artist, Mark Simonetti, who did the French covers. And they're going to be printed on the boards, which is to say, the naked hardback is going to have Simonetti's art on it. The dust jacket is going to have Ortiz's art on it. They are going to be gorgeous. I cannot wait. I will, of course, be buying these. It sounds like they're going to be bringing them out in sets of 3, and The Cripple God, the 10th book, by itself, after the other 3 sets are out. I have no doubt that they will sell out. I am so happy that I have a subscription, so I will definitely be able to get them. I will let you know once I've got them. I will no doubt show them off in a video. And that was one of the biggest pieces of news for me, even if it doesn't really have anything to do with the channel specifically. Other than that, I am right now about this far away, I think about 50 from 2,000 subs. So that should happen sometime probably in February, might have a little live stream, Ask Me Anything, celebration-ish something. Let me know in the comments if that sounds interesting. It feels like it might be completely unnecessary because I do the Sunday pub every Sunday anyway. That is also relevant channel news in a way. The Sunday pub is going great. I think in January I skipped one just because I was busy on that Sunday, but otherwise it's been every Sunday. It's a lot of fun. We've got kind of a regular crowd who turns up every Sunday, but it would be great if you turned up. Also, I would like to encourage you, even if you have no BookTube channel, even if you are maybe slightly nervous being on camera, even if you don't join things like this, drop by the Sunday pub, check out my channel on the Fireside Discord. All the links are down below. Every Friday, Saturday, sometimes Sunday, I post all of the details for anyone who wants to join on screen and show their face, or turn your camera off and just share your voice. But it's really, really cool when more people join on screen. There have been a number of viewers of the channel, people who don't have BookTube channels themselves, people who aren't on video themselves quite a lot. And it's always been a real pleasure to get to know people just that little bit more. And if you're uncomfortable with that, that is, of course, entirely fine. You can just join and watch and write comments. That would be great. See you at the Sunday pub. January was an interesting Fitz month. Fitz decided at the beginning of the month that it was a great idea to wake me up at 5 in the morning every morning. I have no idea why. I think it was mostly just loneliness because I was then unable to sleep, so I got up. But I refused to feed her at 5 in the morning because she does not need to be fed at 5 in the morning. And she was okay with that. She just seemed to want company, I guess. So we somehow got through that. Now she's waking me up more at like 7:30 or 8, which is much more acceptable as far as I'm concerned. And things are certainly going better. I was pretty damn tired for a while there. I said at the beginning of the video that January was a remarkable month of contrasts. The things I watched are no exception. I watched The Brother's Son on Netflix, which is a thriller action kind of thing centered around a family that are part of the triads. And one brother is a super legendary assassin, and the other brother is a completely ignorant of the triads, nerdy teenager in high school. And then he gets brought into the family, and chaos ensues. It's nothing super deep, but it was a lot of fun. If you like action, martial arts, some cheap laughs, and if you don't mind some gore, because there are a couple of messy scenes in there for sure. The other thing that I watched, which was much better than anything I've watched in a long time, is The Expanse. I have not read the books. Some people have convinced me to read the books. I gave the first one a try. I got about 200 pages in and I was just not really hooked, kind of bored with it. So I put it back down. But I'm a huge fan of the series. This was my third watch. I binged 6 seasons of The Expanse in a couple of weeks. It's so good. It's, I would say, the best science fiction television series there is or ever has been. Fight me, bro. And I just super enjoyed watching it again. And it's gotten to the point where it's a bit of a cozy watch because I'm so familiar with it. And it was just, I really enjoyed it. Something I didn't really enjoy. I heard a lot about Rebel Moon before it came out. And I thought, yeah, when that comes out, it's a sci-fi movie. I'm gonna have to watch it. And I was wrong. I was unable to watch it. I got about half an hour in and DNF'd it. It was so bad. Every single scene that was introduced was a cliche. Every single visual was overdone. A farmer sowing seeds in slow motion. I have no problem with slow motion. You can't watch a Snyder film if you have a problem with slow motion. The problem I have is when slow motion is used for absolutely no reason. What slow motion does is it emphasizes something that's happening. And emphasizing someone throwing seeds on the ground and there being no other connection to anything just feels to me like you're padding out the length of the movie. It was just so bad. From the moment that the vagina space portal opened and the spaceship flew through it, I thought, this looks like it's going to be maybe not so good. And boy, was I right. I just don't have anything else to say about it. It was bad. It was really, really bad. But I did play two really good things in January. One was Sea of Thieves. I had been avoiding Sea of Thieves for a long time because it looked kind of cartoony to me and just didn't feel like my kind of thing. If you don't know it, Sea of Thieves is you play a pirate, you have a ship, and you steer the ship around, and there are a bunch of different missions you can do. There's also PvP, you can attack other players and take their shit, that kind of thing. Where it really becomes interesting, and the way I was playing it whenever I played it, was with friends, where you get a bigger ship and one of you is doing the sails and one of you is steering and one of you is shooting the cannons and so on. It is chaotic, hilarious, fun. It's really, really enjoyable. We will no doubt go back to it. We were playing it pretty intense for a while there, like 2 or 3 nights a week. Now we're taking a break, but we will definitely get back to it because it's super fun. Also, I have an ongoing sort of project to play old classics that I missed. There was a period in my life where I didn't play any video games at all, probably about 10 or 15 or maybe even 20 years where I didn't play hardly anything. And one of the things I got back to is Dragon Age Inquisition. Turns out it's a pretty damn good game. You can see where a lot of things in Baldur's Gate came from, where a lot of systems in later role-playing games came from. A lot of story ideas and ways to mechanically expose a story that came from Dragon Age Inquisition. It was really fun. I didn't completely finish it because I was primarily playing it to catch up on an old classic, and I felt kind of like I did that, and I was kind of done with it. The graphics are, as you would expect from a 12-year-old game. It's not pretty, not in the way that a lot of much more recent games are, but it was really, really fun and had some really interesting mechanics as far as like showing you a macro view and then zooming into the story. I really enjoyed it. And that's about it for the month of January. I will try to get my February wrap-up out in the first couple of days of January. I always hate it when it takes a bit too long to get these out. It feels like January is so far away now, and it's not fresh and relevant anymore, maybe. I've been struggling a little bit with motivation to get videos out lately. I'm hoping that will change. I'm trying to do things that may help that change. We'll see. But thanks for your patience. I'm still, I believe, keeping to my 1 video a week minimum plan, which is good. I hope you are doing well. I hope you're reading awesome books, much better than the worst one I read this month, but as good as the best ones I read. And take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time.
Hey, Fitz. Hey, Fitz. Hey, Fitz.